live on YouTube, Miguel.
All right. Great. Welcome everyone to our 12th town hall. We're already in Q3, second half of the year. So to kick things off, we have Jared, who's going to give us an overview of where the next, I don't know, 12, 24, 36 months will lead us. It's a lot of gifts.
Yeah, first up, happy beta. Congratulations, everyone. Thank you so much for putting in so much work. The release is absolutely amazing. And it's so good that we feel comfortable being on mainnet now. From here, hopefully we can start adding more functionality and getting some performance up, and really looking forward to the sort of exciting progress that will be coming up in the next few months and years. So I just really wanted to briefly go over some ideas that I've been kind of floating around my head and start this sort of discussion. So the idea behind Status is it's always meant to be a decentralized autonomous organization. And that's essentially a set of smart contracts that reside in the blockchain that allow us to socially organize. Currently, we're all operating out of a bootstrap organization, which the legal entity is primarily out of Switzerland. But you can imagine this being something like a sort of superset or a super organization above this one. You can also view it as an evolution of the ideas that started off in Open Bounty, except for extending these kind of bounty-like ideas to the entire organization. We're also trying to solve some sort of permissioned issues that Open Bounty had from. So in short, we're working to ascend into a blockchain. A big question is why? Why would we do this? In fact, I think Status probably has one of the best sort of use cases for doing this at the moment. And it's largely due to resilience. Doing a decentralized communication platform that also allows you to send value in a completely trustless and serverless way is probably going to annoy some people further down the line. Oh, is someone cameras on again? Yeah, so basically, if we can move everything into the blockchain, then we're a lot more resilient, and the organization continue to perpetuate itself regardless of our involvement. You can even imagine one day, maybe in 10 or 20 years' time, where it's entirely driven by the community and people who are actually using the software. Allows us to do things like permissionless participation, so anyone can get into it. We can do organizational oversight, so there's a lot more transparency involved, and just, like I said, market directed. So if you're new to the space, you might not have heard of the concept of a DAO, and that's largely due to some historical scarring that happened back in 2016. This was the launch of what was called the DAO. And it was the first sort of decentralized autonomous organization on top of Ethereum. And it failed spectacularly. Not because the concepts were particularly benign, but just because there were some flaws in the code that got exploited by a hacker, leading to millions of dollars being drained from it. So, it's been 2 years now. I think we haven't really seen any large instantiations of DAO-like structures anymore because of this event. But now we have a lot more mature tooling. We have a lot of knowledge. We've learned a lot from that event. And we can do it in a much more sort of modular and sort of controlled way. We can control the capital flow. In the DAO, basically, there was capital flowing everywhere. We'll just take some baby steps with this sort of thing. So basically, there's, I think there's probably roughly 7 or so layers to implementing this. And this starts off all with culture, but then we look at communication, we can look at identity, proposals, this idea of soft governance, profiting from knowledge, and ultimately just dashboards and views onto this as a sort of network data structure that we create. So starting on the bottom layer, this kind of relies on subscribing to this sort of dissented theory of governance. where you view individual actors as having sets of own beliefs, and the practice of state as a cultural practice. And this is basically different actors forming a narrative and establishing traditions and customs and this kind of thing. So getting culture from the very beginning right is a huge, well, if you subscribe to this theory, is a huge determinant in how the direction of this community goes forth into the future. And so there's some things that we need to really think about is like we are involved in the creation of public goods and we are built by the people for the people. You know, transparency, facilitating deeper personal connections, keeping people self-directive, being active in inclusivity, trying to grow the network and bring people in is really important. And on the next slide, I would like to talk about stovepipes and networks. So I think what's really important to kind of grapple here is this idea of network thinking. Basically, community is in our case is synonymous with organization. It's not really a separate thing. There is no external versus internal. In fact, we should be bringing more people into the network to see it grow. This graph that you see here is a weighted graph in terms of public communication within the Slack channel. And you can kind of view our community as all the core contributors at the moment. And there isn't too many people outside of that, unfortunately. So this is something that we really need to start working on. But this is also a preview into what the user interface may look like for managing the status DAO in the future. The next layer is communication. This is pretty much what the last year or 2 years have been all about. Basically, to continue to function, at minimum, we need to be able to communicate, just to coordinate. And we have to do so with the assumption of a hostile environment, which is why we're doing it in a trustless peer-to-peer way. You know, chat with mobile and desktop is really important, but we also need to think about blogging and forums as alternatives as well that are entirely within Web3 and aren't Web 2.5 or relying on any servers. On top of this, we also need to create like identity and voting. Basically, you can't really do really good voting without having some kind of proof of individuality. And there's a couple of different ways we can go about that. A lot of it's basically research topics, but I won't go into it now, just for time's sake. Layer 3, this is probably the most dramatic thing that we're doing, and it's largely inspired by Giveth's idea of liquid pledging. You can imagine a liquid pledge as something like a wallet where you can have multiple people who are, that are funders putting in funds into this wallet. And then you have different people requesting funds from that wallet. And with this, we can essentially create these sort of flexible functional hierarchies without really attributing that hierarchy to people directly. It also allows people to create their own liquid pledges anytime and fulfill them. And you can imagine that there is an entirely different funding hierarchy for status features that's not even done by our core contributor team. You can imagine this also creates an org chart, but it's kind of like a buffet of different functions and tasks that you could essentially get paid or rewarded for fulfilling. So yeah, this is, like I said, liquid pledging is kind of like a wallet. You have some funders who can pledge funds into it to show their intent. So you could imagine like someone proposing activity, and some people with capital can basically go, okay, yeah, this is a good idea. They can put funds in there, and then they can veto rights any requests on their own personal funds. Anyone can request, of course, at any time. And they can be auto-filled if they're not vetoed after a certain period of time. And funds can actually be delegated to different people in this as well to then pass on those delegations. So you can create delegation chains of funds and basically do a sort of direct democracy-like thing, but with actual value. In our case, we'll probably attach a liquid pledge to a particular chat topic. So it's not dissimilar to the swarm ideas model that we're currently doing. It's just that the funds are involved in each individual swarm and each individual chat. So you can imagine like sort of buckets of value, which sort of trickle down. With voting, again, like with these liquid pledges that have chats, we can also attach a voting mechanism to that. So we can actually change the logic in terms of how people request funds and who they get to. So you can imagine offloading this to the community as opposed, or like treating it like a delegate person. So in, say, for example, maybe not this iteration of OKRs, but the next iteration of OKRs, we could actually incentivize people for providing good ideas on what our objectives should be, and they'll get paid out if they get the most votes for that particular idea. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide, which is this one. So far, these are mostly just primitives. They don't really do too much on their own. And they're basically modular and they're finite. So we can basically cancel them at any time. We don't have to worry about sort of runaway funds. Like, we're not going to be committing capital into this in large quantities to start with, and it will be entirely voluntary to participate and testing these ideas. But what this sort of DAO will be mostly doing, at least my initial ideas on this, is doing a sort of like government-like procurement process. So you can imagine, like, we initially put a liquid pledge out there for RFI, a request for information, and then we basically pay people to provide more information. Then we can do a request for proposals after that. We can publish this information and allow people, pay people to provide us proposals. And then we can do an RFT, so people can actually start providing solutions based on those kinds of proposals. Of course, the information and proposals are just guidelines. I mean, the tender solutions could be anything but it's just a different way of getting information. So you can imagine this being really useful for OKRs, where maybe we have like a multi-step request for information process. First, for like getting ideas of things we should focus on from the community, and they can get paid for that. And then maybe we try and filter that down into actual quantitative objectives, and the people who facilitate that are incentivized to do so, because we will also pay them to do that. So yeah. Another layer is doing a prediction market or profit from knowledge. So you could imagine we could use something like Augur or Gnosis on top of this to basically allow competition over request fulfillment. So you could imagine that testers who are paid to test against a particular swarm feature, and they see it's not going so well, maybe they can actually bet against the developers in terms of their ability to get their funding requests made, and they'll have to adjust it to a more sensible level. And vice versa, the developers could potentially bet against testers. But even more broadly, you could even imagine traders getting involved and being able to become basically play against our execution performance organization-wide. So for anybody wanting to have a quick overview of the organization, could look at these different modules and just see how well that's performing based on the games that are being played, which would be really interesting. And the final layer is basically dashboards, and how do we actually present all this information to the user or to anyone who wants to have oversight of the organization. It'll probably be a DApp inside Status itself. I imagine there'll be a large network visualization component to this because it's really useful for finding communication lines between people, finding out areas of activity. You'll be able to identify funding dependencies, and we'll also make it so you can color these things, so we can actually create quote unquote teams through essentially a cosmetic grouping of nodes, but they wouldn't actually have any functional value. It's just good for reasonability. You can imagine that we have like a search feature, so maybe like all of these things are tagged, and if you're only interested in people ops or you're only interested in communication stuff, you'll be able to filter out those things, and then even maybe like a minimum maximum earning potential that you could filter out. So you could you could literally change this network topology and view to what's relevant to you, and get a very quick oversight over everything that's happening. I think that's it from me.
Awesome. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not looking at YouTube. Maybe if there are questions or comments from YouTube, we can, or for anyone else who's on the call, we can address those now rather than people losing context towards the end. So is anyone, Johnny, or can you see whether, is there anything that's come up? Or anyone?
I think we can create like a channel, it's like Status DAO, and then we can, if anyone's interested in discussing these things further, we can jump into that.
Okay, that's a good idea. All right, awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Jared. So moving on, we have our non-tech updates, our regular. So first of all, we have 4 new core contributors who joined the team. Michael, Obi, Michael again, and Andre, helping out on a variety of places. We also have, as usual, still around 20 open roles. And yeah, particularly on the design agency, we're still hiring, I think, 5 there. And on Incubate, we're now, we'll have an update later. But anyway, so check out the referral program, still there. Following up from kind of Jared's comments earlier about creating a voting mechanism in the DAO. So as part of our Q3 OKRs, we have, I would say, one of the first instantiations of being able to use SNT as a utility inside the application. This is on the right, you can see kind of like our voting DApp. The URL is still being, where there's still a couple iterations left. So hopefully by tomorrow, we'll have a URL we can share with everyone that's going to be on mainnet. Basically, how it works is, if you're holding SNT in your status wallet, you can vote. So you can add a proposal, whatever your idea is, all right, for any new features that you think would be useful. Anyone else can then go in, look at those ideas, and then vote using their SNT. So you take a copy of the amount of SNT you have. So let's say, for example, I have 100 SNT in my wallet. It makes a copy of that 100, and I can use that to vote for whichever feature that I want to be built in Q3. We use quadratic voting, so you can see, if I have 100 SNT, I get 10 votes, and so on and so forth. So it takes the square root of the number of SNT you have as the number of votes you can make. This will be open for the next week, and we'll kind of try and get as many people to engage, to add features, to vote, and then next Monday we can figure out what this looks like and integrate that into as kind of the key part or the core part of our team OKRs. So yeah, this is very exciting. Great work to Barry and Richard, who have been hammering on this for the past week. And I was playing around with it even this morning, and it's pretty much ready to go. Just need to put it on mainnet and tweak a couple of things. The one thing I'd kind of point out to all the teams is that based on, we have a feature request section that's in need help inside the app. And right now, like our #1 most popular feature is being able to send images. And #2 is logging in with Touch ID or Face ID. So let's just make sure that the feature requests that our users are asking for, and especially in this case, when people are voting with their SNT, are reflected in what we end up building and what we're prioritizing in our research. So if everyone really wants the ability to send images, then let's make sure that we build it. Awesome. So that's Q3 OKRs, and as I said, the URL for you to access inside of Status will be coming in the next 24 hours or so. All right, Carrie.
Hi, this is Kerry giving you a People Ops update. We've heard a lot about it already on this call. It's OKRs time. So what we wanted to do with this section is really just to give you a sneak preview of the kind of things that we're focusing on in the next quarter. In Q2, we really were looking at the basics. So being responsive, creating documentation, those kind of foundational things. Beyond that, there are so many more things that we need to get right. So we want to just make sure that we create as smooth an experience as possible for all of the team members working here. We also have some big questions that we want to answer. We know that we're aiming to be a decentralized autonomous organization. How do we do that whilst also supporting the people that work within it? So Project Flatten is looking at the idea of people leads, like what would be alternatives to that? How can we support people without relying on traditional people management? The second is compensation structure. So how do we create a fair, transparent, equitable way of paying people and determining pay rises? We want to really improve our onboarding so that it's not just kind of like a functional information sharing experience, but for new joiners, really a chance for us to impart the culture and add delight. Performance management is something that sounds kind of dry, but for us is really important, and it's about increasing the flow of feedback amongst peers. So we want to help make feedback systems, guidelines, training to help everyone give feedback to one another so that we can all grow together. More guidelines. I think documentation sounds boring, but we found it's really helpful to answer commonly asked questions. We're adding to that all the time. So if you see anything that we haven't documented that you think is really important, let us know, and we'll include that in our People Ops site. Another section that we want to focus on in Q3 is compliance, making sure that we are being compliant with employment laws, data security legislation, those kind of things. And that's something that we want to pay a bit more attention to. And then lastly, on hiring, we want to just make sure that we're challenging ourselves to be very deliberate and strategic in how we hire, meet our targets, and also just set some turnaround times for how we want to achieve and get those hires on board. I know this has been said already, but I just want to say it again. We are so lucky to have such fantastic people here in the organization and the wider community as one. So just really a shout out. I know that you all have put so much energy, enthusiasm, and passion into the beta launch, and it was just really awesome to see all around. And lastly, a really boring one, but this is expenses. And if you wouldn't mind, if possible, please can you group your expenses up to like a de minimis of $50 before submitting? That really helps finance because they have to process each transaction individually. If it's not possible for cash flow reasons, no big deal, but just something that would really help our finance team out. So if you can do that, that would be great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Carrie. Johnny or Kim?
I think Johnny's mic is actually not working, so Sean and I are going to take marketing.
All right.
So just really quickly, high level, going through some of the ongoing things. We have our tech talks in progress, team updates. We have 4 series going on right now that are in creation, Whisper, UX, design and research, and people ops. And then, of course, our usual call for content, because we really want to make sure that we are capturing the content that really will resonate within the community from our devs and from community members. So it's our usual call for content. Please bubble up anything that from the tech side might be noteworthy. State of Us campaign, again, that is launching this month with a lot of fun things, community competitions, infographics. Our podcast is going to launch. We have some great guests. We have Jared and Carl as the first one for the kickoff. We're going to be talking to Hester and Patrick on the UX research side. And then we also have Glenn Weil, author of Radical Markets, all interviewed by our own Crypto Wonder, Andy Ted Hope. Sean, I'll let you take advocacy.
Cool. So onto the advocacy program. So we're still kind of chugging away. Looks like we're gonna start kicking off on the base layer, like platform development. We've identified kind of 2 solutions that we're working towards potentially in parallel, but yeah, we're gonna try and kick off this week. But in the meantime, as part of the advocacy program, a lot of the kind of assignments and kind of community building tasks that we have, that's kind of something where we're working actually quite closely with different community members, holding calls. If you're interested to feed into this process, please reach out to myself or Chris or anyone else in the marketing team, and we can definitely try and set up some calls to try and get your feedback. So we're just working through that. Aside from that, we've got, Kim just said, the community competition, which is tied to State of Us and the campaign, and that should be kicking off in the next 24 hours, hopefully. So keep your eye out for that. It's really exciting. And then local channel launches. So going further, we're We're looking to try and launch a Spanish-speaking channel. So off the back of F Buenos Aires and all the interest that we've seen from the community, the Spanish-speaking community, we're building out a plan of how we can launch dedicated Spanish-speaking channels. And Eduardo's doing a great job on that. And that should be coming in the next week or so. And then the last piece is the content creator series. So we're actually, as part of the beta, we're actually working with, I'm actually proud to say, we're working with content creators across multiple languages to actually unpack the beta further and kind of tell an interesting narrative, whether it's on, the road to beta or, even just for some of the markets that we don't produce a lot of content for, so non-English speaking markets, being able to go into more depth on kind of, what is in the latest update. Yeah.
I think we can probably skip over community events and status projects. Nothing has really changed since last time. Can you jump to the next slide, Nabil?
Cool. I'll keep going then. So this is just something that we want to try and do more often now as part of this process. So looking back at the content over the past fortnight and comparing it to the previous fortnight. So we have a gauge of how our content has performed. So, with the last fortnight, we obviously saw a lot of momentum behind the beta. But what was actually really interesting was that the total impressions, like fortnight on fortnight, decreased by 15%. But what we did see was we saw a pretty substantial increase in overall engagements, and our actual total following grew by, it doubled actually what the growth was of the previous reporting period. So in terms of looking into it deeper in terms of the balance between impressions versus engagements, that kind of comes down to, Kim might go to the next slide. Kind of comes down to a focus on, trying to be, I guess, with the beta, trying to be a bit more focused on the grassroots and the community, and, really test it out and not go big with a PR kind of announce. In the previous reporting period, we had the announces around us joining the ECF and obviously Crypto Strikers, which got a bit of press. So what we did see with that was an increase in overall impressions. But when you move below that, in terms of if you consider impressions to be a vanity metric, if you move below that and you actually look at engagements, what we actually saw was we saw a pretty substantial volume of actually people talking about status. And while the total mentions increased by 121%, based on the previous fortnights, we actually saw the volume of mentions on Twitter increase by 235%. Based on the previous fortnight. So I guess based on our objective of trying to get more people talking about beta, we were successful in that, and fortunately, the beta show doesn't end here, and we've got a lot more pieces of content to come. So that's that.
So for our top performing content, what we have been doing is bucketing our content into 3 content pillars. The first one is really for sort of the non-techie audience. It requires little to no understanding of Ethereum. And this would be sort of release notes and general updates. Bucket 2 requires the minimal understanding of Ethereum. And then bucket 3 requires experience as a developer. So much more highly technical content. So our top performing content, we had obviously the beta release announcement on Twitter with 156,000 plus impressions and 1,700 total engagements. That was not surprising. I think we were expecting the beta release tweet to perform that well. The second top performing was the release of our UI video for beta, which again I think was not a surprise. That I think was well received by the community. We have I think almost 1,200 likes on YouTube in the first or views on the first 5 days, which is not bad. And then in content pillar 2, the top performing content was a piece we did on custom boot notes, which I believe was part of not the beta release, but the release prior, the 0920. And so that did fairly well also with the decent number of impressions. And then content pillar 3, our much more technical audience, the top performing piece was the Embark Tech Talk, which also a decent amount of impressions. and engagement there. Next slide. So this is just a quick look at our email performance. And this is from last week. So just concentrating on the week of the beta launch versus the week prior, because I think typically we're not too heavy on the email marketing side unless it's some sort of announcement or release. We don't do standard marketing emails. So just looking at the beta release week, you can see the email performance. We sent about 95,000 emails out. And so far, we have an open rate of 46%, which is pretty good overall. And then also, you can also see the contacts by source with the lifecycle stage. This gets a little tricky because it kind of reports on what the original contact was. So most of them show as direct traffic, so people who went to our site directly. But there was also a decent amount of organic search, which was nice to see as well, and referrals. Next slide. This is our site traffic. So we had, in just the last week, we had an increase of 45% in our site traffic sessions, which was really nice to see. And again, I don't think it was too terribly surprising for beta. That's the number of visitors to the status site during last week as compared to the week prior. Again, it was driven by the beta launch, and the majority of the time spent on the site was on the beta sign up, beta email confirmation. So that was, again, really nice to see. And one thing worth, I think, just throwing out there is that during our beta release, which I think went pretty smoothly by everyone's standards, Slack went down. And what was really nice was that everybody instinctively jumped over and started communicating using the app. So we didn't even really skip a beat with sort of coordinating all the communications and things around beta, which was really nice. So it was like, okay, Slack is down. All right, let's jump into the status app and let's start communicating that way. So that was actually a really nice use case that we lived out firsthand during the beta release. Next slide. I think that might be it.
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Kim and Sean. Cool. Next up is a proposed Hack Week. Chad?
Yeah, okay. This is an idea for a Hack Week coming up on July 9 to 14. And basically, we've spent a lot of time focusing on the beta, and that involves like bug fixes and a lot of this like solid like performance and reliability work. But it can be an amazing opportunity to take a step back and just work on whatever we want. Hack Weeks are used a lot in different companies to drive new ideas, have cross-pollination between like teams and people, as well as like exploring new opportunities. And some Hack Weeks I've seen people spending time like learning the piano or doing art installations, but other times people are like scratching an itch. So I know there's a lot of projects we've wanted to take on over the last few months, but just haven't had the time because we're working on beta. Hack Week could be an amazing time to like put forward some ideas, like recruit a team. Works best when you haven't like worked with these people before. And these ideas can come from anywhere. And so hopefully we'll see a lot of submissions from the community. We'll see like open bounty contributors joining in. We'll see this regular users with like a wonderful idea. We might see like blockchain reinvented. We might see some new things for S&T that we haven't thought of before. So next steps is to jump onto our forum at discuss.status.im. There's a thread there. Suggest an idea, find projects to work on, and kind of try to drive that collaboration. Usually it works by leading up to it. Ideas are proposed, teams are formed. The first 4 days of the Hack Week, everyone gets hacking. And on the last day, there's a type of async presentation where we vote on it. And so people can either like upload videos or slide decks, something like that. And we can all like look at it async and vote. And coming from Hack Week, we might choose to implement some ideas because they're really awesome, or put some on the roadmap, or otherwise it's just a great opportunity for us to have some fun. So yeah, hope to see you on the forum.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. Next, we have a quick update on our Incubate project with the slight shift in strategy. Ben?
Yes, hello, thanks, Nabil. So I guess I've got a few updates. The first one is with Crypto Strikers. So I guess most of you would have heard, we've been incubating them for over a month now. And I just wanted to use this opportunity to thank the people involved. There was Richard, Johnny, Hutch, Jason, Andre, Julian, Rachel, and others that really contributed to the incubation period for Crypto Strikers. And we've seen some great results. In terms of their future, we're going to be continuing to support them until the end of World Cup, and then we'll figure out a roadmap that sort of makes sense for both of us. But so far, it's been really great. In terms of the approach for Incubator, we've pivoted from what we originally thought we were going to do. We now are going forward with a fully decentralized program, and there's a few reasons behind that. Reason number one would be to ensure that what we're doing with the incubator is in line with our core principles of decentralization. And what that means is that we would no longer need to pursue physical space, and we'll start to have a program that's purely decentralized and purely remote. So there's pros and cons for both. I think the pros outweigh the cons in this case. So we will be able to accept people from all over the world. We'll be able to leverage off the fact that we are a decentralized organization and really good at it. And so we can basically use the existing model that we have and incubate up and coming projects. In terms of the actual formal program, that'll start hopefully in October 2018. And it'll be a 3-month program with batches of about 4 to 5 projects. Of course, this number can change. And there'll be a formal program that we've already developed the core for. And it'll involve your usual mentorship, your time allocated to the different areas that an incubatee would need assistance with, whether it's technical or marketing or whatever it may be. The next intake, however, between this fully decentralized program and Crypto Strikers is a sort of in-between intake of 2 projects. Unfortunately, I can't announce what the projects are, but they will be public hopefully in the next couple of weeks. They're really, really exciting, 2 very different projects in 2 different parts of the world. So one thing that I would ask for, though, is if anybody's interested in helping them, please send me a message. Volunteers are definitely welcome. And you know, these new projects are very early stage and will require help from you know, all of us. Lastly, manpower. We are hiring for this incubator program in order to ensure that we can launch a program by October and ensure that we have a really, really solid decentralized program. We need to hire 4 main positions. The first one being the program manager, which will facilitate the entire program for the 3 months and help with the coursework. The second is a dedicated marketing manager for Status Incubate. And this person will also help to set up the marketing strategies for the individual projects that are within the incubator. Similarly, the designer or the UX contact would also work with the incubatee specifically. And the last one is a research analyst, where this person will be in charge of basically looking at applications, analyzing their GitHubs, and also sourcing proactively projects to be included within the incubator. So most of these positions are up on the website, but if you know anyone or you're interested, please let me know. That's it for me.
Awesome. If you want to get involved in volunteering, there's the Incubate channel, hashtag Incubate. You can join. Awesome. Moving on to design update. Andre.
Sure. Since the beta has launched, we're currently working on improving and systemizing the UI of the app. You can jump on to the next slide, please. It's just a brief walkthrough of what's going on in terms of the design system. So we are working on, you can go through the slides. You can wait for 5 seconds and go through them. So yeah, it's the color palette type. It's quite a few of them. Color palette, typography. We're working on refining our icon set and making it more, look alike. There's finally a link with some basic brand assets available for download. This is also going to be, it's work in progress and going to be improved. And we're also working on specifying and documenting the components of the app so that they would be less coupled together, form a solid structure, and make it easier to outsource some of the design work. So here are the toolbars. some badges, all with the documentation of the priorities and all that sort of stuff. Next slide. The transaction messages. Next one. The commands and the text input. So all of those little parts now form a unified system, which would improve the UI quality and the basic flows. And also, like, yeah, a brief walkthrough of the currently, the stuff that is currently in progress, like the seamless login with the Face ID and Touch ID, which was highly requested by the community. We're also working on wall improvements and chat commands, and yeah, and finally adding animations and gestures pretty much soon, and working on a new doc site. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the design and the UI UX part. Thank you.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks a lot, Andre. All right, moving on to our core swarms. Not sure who this is. Chad, Rachel?
Yeah, it's me. So a quick update on core. We've had a big goal to launch the beta, and we've covered it so far, but the beta was released. And we saw a pretty nice spike in downloads, messaging users, and transacting users, which is a really good sign. And this is a reminder for everyone that the beta is mainnet by default. We're going to keep going with ongoing releases. We aim for a weekly release cadence. And so we're going to aim to cut 0922 this week and release next week. And what we're aiming for with the beta is to inform our 1.0 launch. We're really looking out for community feedback and bugs and crashes and issues, because we want the 1.0 launch to be as solid as possible. So we're really hardening that at the moment. So please, like, definitely drop a note in with Instabug, shake your phone, go to GitHub issues, use the OKR like voting DApp or the request a feature in the app. Anyway, we want to hear from you. So our next big milestone is the 1.0 launch. So one of the goals we have in the next couple of weeks is to build consensus and alignment around what we want 1.0 to be. So we want to start a conversation on discuss.status.iam. We're going to talk about a feature freeze process leading up to the next security audit, which is a hard blocker for launch, similar to what we had for beta. And we want to see how we can leverage the beta workflows that we had, with teams being responsible for their roadmap, working with the community on input, and working on a bigger milestone that we can all track and have visibility over. And again, we definitely want the community to be part of this. So vote, discuss, chat in status, and a big thank you to everyone that's been doing that so far. We read all of your messages in like the status and Ethereum and other channels. And we read every Instabug report. Yeah, if we don't get back to you, we do have a lot, but all of it is read and appreciated. Yeah, that's the goal for 1.0.
Thanks, Chad. Mobile app. So, Igor?
Yeah.
Cool.
Hi, everyone. So, yeah, so we released the beta. It was a pretty good job and pretty good launch. And unfortunately, there is one thing that we actually that slipped through in beta, and that's battery performance regression. So it actually behaves worse than on Android devices than the previous releases we did. And we are currently investigating and fixing this, but the most likely root cause of that was the React Native upgrade to 0.55.4. And it's Android only, and it requires you to type relatively long messages. And that was the point why it's missed from our test cases. So we do performance tests like before releases and things. And I showed the small table about how like the dates and what was the like battery consumption. The less, the better. So between the May 28th and the June 21st, there wasn't really a change. But that was because we were testing probably on too short messages to notice this difference, which wasn't the true for the like real applications. So what we do next, we already switched to the fork of React Native to be able to fix bugs there as soon as possible, because they're not super responsive there. We will have to downgrade React Native for at least some time while we are investigating and fixing the actual root cause inside it. And yeah, we are planning to actually submit a PR to React Native repository. And we, of course, fixed our performance test cases. That's pretty much all from my side. So if there are any questions, just ping me on Riot.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Igor. Infra Tooling, Jacob? Jakub?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
So in lead up to the beta release, we haven't done as much as in the previous announcements, but the major announcements are we have a new DevOps engineer, which will be a lot of help. So welcome, Jason. And in preparation for that, there was a lot of work done with updating and cleaning up the repos and data documentation. So the onboarding is much smoother. In other bigger things, we now have proper alerting for the status infrastructure, which includes both health checks and metric-based alarms based on various thresholds. And these are sent out both by email and to the alerts channel in Slack. Other than that, there's been a lot of smaller preparation work for the beta, including that there's a universal mobile app handler, which essentially is for linking status app related things like channels and users via HTTP links, and that has been deployed. It's fully continuously deployable right now. It still needs some work on the availability, but it's out there and so already can be used by users. If we switch to the next slide, it's just some examples of how we can now track the health of our current infrastructure, either via the UIs we have available or through the alerts channel in Slack, if anyone is interested. And that's usually the place to look if you want to see if there's any work being done on fixing the issues with the infrastructure, if there are any visible in the alerts channel. That's about it.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thanks, Jakub. Mail servers.
Hey, it's Adam. Yeah, so we have just started working on the swarm, and the main goal is to make mail servers discoverable. So currently they are hard-coded in the app, so that's the one more thing that we need to finish to make sure that the whole setup is decentralized, in at least on the level that you want it to be centralized right now. We'll work on this more in the future. But yeah, this has just started, so we pretty much prepare like some sequence diagrams, some overall plan how you want to approach that. And yeah, that's gonna be continued in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Awesome. Other P2P initiatives?
Yeah, so there are more general things that are not, they're smaller and not really wrapped into the swarm. So the first thing is implemented mail server pagination. So that was a huge effort from Andrea. He made a pull request, and that was already merged, I guess, or it's almost gonna be merged like today or tomorrow. But I guess it's already merged. So pretty much that's a huge thing for improving performance. So especially for public chats where we right now downloading pretty a lot of messages, this gives more control over what's downloaded, which messages are requested. So hopefully we can start doing the changes on the status React side pretty soon. The next thing is researching the new protocol for peer discovery. This is based on the specification and that was created by IPFS team. So that's an effort to pretty much implement a better peer discovery protocol that uses less traffic, increases speed, and improve reliability. So we would like to maybe couple this with Discovery version 5 protocol that we use with Ethereum nodes. But yeah, right now it's kind of in the research area, and Dimitri is working on that. And yeah, cluster health on P2P level, it's still in progress. We have one nice tool with 3D visualization, but it provides some basic information for now. Hopefully we can build more on top of this to get more insight into what's going on in our cluster, to make sure that it's healthy pretty much, and also to research how it behaves when we do some changes. So this is still in progress. We started work on this a few weeks ago, but that's not really a priority right now. So that for these 2 things first are the top priority. So that would be it.
Awesome, thanks, Adam. Moving on to chat. We have chat confidence. Pedro?
Hi. So last couple of weeks, we focused on the beta release. We added localized default chats. We developed a fix for Korean chat, Chinese, Japanese character input, which was another regression after the React Native update. Kudos to Igor for helping with that. And we did a bunch of other fixes and improvements. We're going to be aborting the swarm, even though it was successful, mainly because we are lacking the metrics to support any decision. And this is something we need to fix to have the Instabug input that we need in the future. So for the future goals, we're going to be performing the retrospective tomorrow in our weekly sync. And we've already started work on some great improvements. For instance, the universal deep links and the message sounds. Yeah, so that's great to see this work getting started already. And we already were able to test some of this, and it's looking great. This Wednesday to Friday, we'll be meeting in Basel with the UXR team, the chat team, QA, and some members from the research team to discuss values and security aspects about chat. There's some conversations every now and then about what we expect from chat coming from status. And it's good to sit down and all together discuss on what we believe that status should stand for in terms of chat and security and privacy and all that. So yeah, I've started the thread on Discuss so that the community and the rest of us at Status can contribute to the discussion and follow progress. So feel free to go there and voice your opinions. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Pedro. Wallet account, ENS usernames. Ricardo, are you online, or anyone else from the ENS username stuff? Or is this? Okay.
I can speak quickly on that. It wasn't too much activity done on ENS last week. Well, we shifted focus to voting, but it is currently on testnet and being iterated on. One thing we've also done is just started the registration process of status.eth on the testnet, so that we can more mimic what the experience will be like once it's on mainnet, in the sense that names registered under status.eth will be like first class names, so you can just use the name without having to enter the full domain, so effectively be a username. But that's basically where it currently stands.
Awesome. Thanks, Barry. Wallet improvements.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to welcome Jan, Philip, and Obi, who joined this team/swarm. So yeah, we have reinforcements. That's great. The progress over the last 2 weeks was mostly around bug fixing and mostly around the beta release. So that's something we are not planning to stop now that the beta is out. So obviously we're still bug fixing and refactoring. And one of the larger items on that front is the command API. So shortly put, we are getting rid of the existing command API, and we'll replace it with something a lot simpler. And a lot more manageable. And generally, the goal in the immediate future is to provide a stable and consistent and bug-free wallet experience. So that's more or less it, polish and bug fixing. Yay.
Awesome.
Yep.
DApps and developer stuff.
Yep. Hey. So because Q2 just ended, I'd like to share a couple numbers on DApp usage and transactions quickly. Over the last 7 days, about 35% of users opened a DApp, and 11% of those users made transactions within a DApp. And because these metrics come only from users who have explicitly opted into tracking, we can assume that the actual numbers are actually much closer to our goals of 60% of users opening a DApp and 20% transacting overall. So that's great. Also some great progress by the DApp team in the last 2 weeks. Unfortunately, also mostly on fixes and blockers. Headline news is that collectibles did not make the beta cut because at the last minute, we had some security concerns about the remote SVG images that we use to display them. Those risks are ultimately going to require a longer term solution. So we plan on adding some form of security audit to our PR checklist and releasing collectibles in the next release. Other major fixes from the past 2 weeks. Browser history is back. So for dApps where navigation states change, you can once again navigate back and forth. Certain links in dApps didn't work because they were targeting new tabs. That was a big blocker, so we're happy to have a fix in for that. DApp transactions were sometimes failing because estimated gas costs were too low, so we added a multiplier that should prevent those errors in the future. And on the developer side, there were a few blockers to running status locally. So Alex has made some updates to how we include certain dependencies and also to the version of NPM installed with our setup script. Hopefully that will unblock new developers from building status. And then lastly, some progress on extensions and on the developer doc site. Julian feels good saying that the extensions MVP is now production ready. He's added error handling and worked on infrastructure and tooling for continuous integration documentation. On the topic of documentation, Andy has built a really beautiful starter site for the future docs.status.im using Docusaurus. And we're actually going to kick off a documentation swarm to get some more momentum behind that project tomorrow. Over the next 2 weeks, we also plan more improvements to the browser and to the DApp screen. And we'll be making more concrete headway on extensions and chat commands. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. Research. I know there was the Jacek. Are you on the call? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there you go. Sweet. You want to give us an update
on
the dev conference?
Yeah, so give a quick bit. Most of us are still trying. The research team got together in Berlin for a conference that we organized together with Ethereum development. So we had members from all the major client implementations come together and discuss basically protocol and client related matters, including parity, gas, Trinity, Harmony. Drops of Diamond couldn't make it, unfortunately, but Prismatic Labs were there, and Pegasus, or the spin-off consensus that deals with protocol matters. We had presentations ranging from performance to sharding simulations to what the new beacon chain design will be for Starks and Snarks, all kinds of stuff, very interesting things. We'll be publishing those videos as soon as they've been edited. Other than that, great together with the team, discuss what to do for the next quarter, and yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Jacek. It was cutting out a bit, so maybe next time you can give a bit of more of an overview of exactly what went down. But yeah, kudos to you and to Rajani for putting it all together.
Yeah, we'll do.
All right, desktop, Vitaly, or anyone else from the desktop team.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Hey, yep.
Good. Okay, so during the past 2 weeks, we've started doing the grand task of developing desktop merges. So far, it's been done in one direction. So recent develop changes have been merged to desktop. And for the next 2 weeks, we're looking forward to doing the reverse branch merge so that desktop will be merged into develop. And finally, we'll have a single code base for both desktop and mobile. We've also been doing some UI changes across the code and some bug fixing. I'd just like to highlight 2 things like the profile window updates. There were some PRs in progress and updated chat designs. We have lots of stuff that is in progress, and we're looking forward to finally nail down some of the UI stuff that is still preventing those PRs from getting merged, and close down all of the remaining P0 issues. I've also put in the next slide, like a sort of on a humorous side. Yeah. So this is the current progress we've had so far. yeah, it's getting better, I'd say. Not everything is merged yet, but hopefully we'll get there. So it's been austere, now it's getting a bit too colorful. Also kudos to the great design work by Oige and team.
Yeah, it's starting to come together.
Yeah. So
awesome. Thanks a lot. All right, our last update from the Embark team. Is this the first update from Embark, or do you guys update?
Yeah, on the Townhall, yes, it's the first one.
Awesome.
But not the last.
It's a long time. It's a long time not having you guys on it.
Yeah. So yeah, we plan to do releases once a month, more or less. But yeah, we'll try at least every 2 weeks at Townhall, if possible. So this month we released Embark 3.1, which we named Planet Express. It was quite a big release. It had a lot of new features. Just some of those new features include, for instance, a light client wallet, so the developer can specify his own accounts and things like balances if it's in a development chain. We completely revamped the testing framework. It's much faster and also much more clean. There are things like a transaction logger, a contract profiler, as well as creating much better graphs, which should make the developers' lives much easier. We also added initial support for ENS. Initial meaning we added on the DApp side, and we plan on having full support end-to-end for the next release. We also improved the performance overall very much, from starting Embark to building the DApp to the tests themselves. And we still have some improvements to do, actually, but we believe right now it's the fastest smart contract testing framework out there. For the next 2 weeks, we are rethinking the Embark pipeline, meaning how we make use of Webpack and how we can better support different workflows so that developers can fine-tune how they want to build their DApp. So, for example, for production, they can create much smaller JavaScript while maintaining for developer things like source maps that they might need for debugging. And we're also putting a lot of effort in creating more tutorials and improving the documentation.
Great. All right. That's it. Thanks, everyone. Time for Q&A. So I don't know if there's anything coming through on Status or YouTube or Riot, mini channels. Is there any questions? Johnny or anyone else who's watching, is there?
Yeah, there's one here. How large and active does the community have to be for you to dissolve the organization? What are the markers for success? I think that was for
that was for Jared. Unless Jared asked the question, which is, yeah, Jared. You still on the call?
Sorry, can you please repeat that?
How large and active does the community have to be for you to dissolve the organization? What are the markers for success?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure if it's a function of how large and active it has to be. It's rather more that any functions that are laid out or any structure that ends up being created by us or the community gets fulfilled and continues to perpetuate itself. I guess it's kind of like a blockchain, like how many people do you need for a blockchain to continue perpetuating? And maybe there's one day that a public blockchain only has one person with their laptop somewhere with the full stake, and then some other people start joining and it starts up again. So yeah, I don't know if I have a clear answer from that.
Cool.
We have another question. This is for you, Nabil, on OKRs. Do you spend S&T to vote, or are the votes weighted based on how much S&T a user has? And actually, Jared typed a reply. I'll just read this and maybe you can add to it. You don't spend S&T. Polls take a snapshot of S&T balances at poll creation block time and make a clone voting token.
Yep, and basically exactly right. So if you have 100 S&T in your status wallet, you don't you don't actually spend that 100. You have 100 SNT to use to vote. And the number of votes you have so if you have 100 and you can, in the UI, you can actually see it. So as you slide it along, the little slider in the diagram, you can actually see how many votes you're putting in with the amount of SNT. But that's just for voting. That's not actually spending it. So it's just, you're not actually investing. You're just, depending on how much SNT you have, you can have a bigger say on what gets built and what doesn't. Cool. Any others?
At the time of that poll's creation.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you to all the presenters, and hope you all have a great couple of weeks.
One more question, Bill.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
What if the SNT are in a different wallet?
You move your SNT into the status. Yeah, I mean, actually, Jared, would it work through, I haven't tested it, would it work through MetaMask, or it only works through?
I mean, yeah, it's a DApp, so it should work through MetaMask. That's definitely a valid point. But yeah, it's the address that's holding the SNT at the time of that particular poll's creation is where the balance snapshot comes from. So if you wanted to use it in your status wallet, then you should transfer the SNT into that wallet prior to the poll creation. So we should probably actually have maybe a couple of days or a week before we start creating many polls, and communicate that people should be getting ready, so there's not any confusion when we're ready to vote.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Well, yeah, hopefully people have gone through this and seen that there's progress being done. So it may then take us a little bit longer for us to share the URL, but hopefully we'll be able to have some SNT-based feature voting coming in the next, week. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Thanks.